It's the same thing. So who is going to judge it? It has to be an expert. And we have them. We have the experts. And they will, you bring your poetry, we'll send it to the experts and they will dismantle it for you. You understand? You're not going to be able to do it. Allah said you can't do it and you will not be able to do it. So don't fear that challenge. Don't fear it. If Allah has said it, believe that they cannot do it. Now, back to the issue. Why didn't the early Arabs do it? If you consider that when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ started his da'wah, right? Remember, who are the Quraysh? The Quraysh are living in Mecca. They have, the Kaaba is in their territory. The Kaaba has around it more than 360 idols. Idols from all over Arabia. Because of that, all of the tribes are making pilgrimage to Mecca all the time. They're bringing in goods and there's trading going on, and the Quraysh are right in the center, right? They are the middlemen. They're making it. They're rich. They're living good. Now here comes Muhammad ﷺ, and he's saying all of these idols are false. Just one God who's not an idol, finish. Hey, this is serious. This is threatening our old economic existence. We need to stop this very quickly. So they came to him. You know, first they asked Abu Talib, listen, please talk to him. Quieten him. Of course Abu Talib said, hey, you know, I can't stop him. So they came, they got some people together, they came to him and asked him, hey, would you like to be the king of Mecca? This is power. They're checking him out, you know. He says, power? We can make you the king of Mecca if you just give this thing up. No. Is it money? Wealth? We can gather together portions of our wealth and make you the richest man in Mecca. No. What else? Women. Okay, we will get the most beautiful of our women, most beautiful women, and we'll give them to you as your wives. No. What to do? They cannot tempt him. He is calling. It is a disease. It is spreading. So you're trying to torture these people, you know, trying to get them back to stop this thing from spreading and affecting their whole well-being of the whole society. So they decide, listen, we better boycott them. We need to starve them into submission. So when they tried to put the boycott on Prophet ﷺ, of course his whole tribe, Banu Hashim, you know, they're into this thing, you know. You got to stick with the tribe. So they went down with them. They went into the state where they were being boycotted for some 2 years. I mean, they reached the point, as the Sahaba described it, where they were eating leaves and grass. And they said, at night, we used to just reach around. If we felt anything moving, we'd just get in and eat it. In the daytime, of course, you couldn't eat this stuff. You're eating a bug. You know. At night, you don't know what, you can't see it, you can eat it, right? Because they had to eat some protein. This is the state that they had reached. And when it seemed like they had almost starved them into submission, then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ informed Abu Talib that the contract which they had made to boycott the Prophet ﷺ, which had been written and put inside of the Kaaba, which had at the beginning Bismillah and then their contract, that termites had eaten up the whole thing except for the Bismillah. It's inside of the Kaaba with the door closed. Nobody has gone inside. So Abu Talib informs them, and they said, no way, he's talking nonsense. So Abu Talib says, okay, if he is lying, then we will drop our support for him and you can do what you wish. We'll no longer protect him. But if he's telling the truth, he's betting him, right? This was a bet. If he's telling the truth, then you have to stop the boycott. I said, sure, we agree to that. Because they had the key. They knew nobody went inside. How could he possibly know it? And of course, they opened it up, went inside, and sure enough, Bismillah is all that was left. So they were forced to stop the boycott. What to do? The disease is spreading. So they said, okay, next thing, only thing left to do is to kill him. We have to kill him in Mecca here. It's to stop this thing. We need to just kill him. But they couldn't take one, no one from any of the clans could go and do it, because if somebody from one clan killed somebody from another clan, then you had a clan feud which would last for hundreds of years. You know, the feuds. So they said, no, we have to get somebody from all of the clans. We get young men from each of the clans, and they all go and kill him together. So if they all kill him together, Banu Hashim cannot take the rest of us on, all of us. No, they'll have to just go with the flow. And we have ended the job, the problem. So, you all know they tried to do it. Prophet ﷺ was instructed by Allah to go to Medina, and he left. Ali was left in his place. He got away. But they weren't so satisfied. I mean, one would have thought, okay, he's left Mecca, enough. That's what they wanted to get rid of him. No, they saw him as a disease, a real threat. So they sent scouts out there trying to catch him, even on the way. After he got to Medina, they sent troops fighting, trying to kill him, you know, war. They lost lives. People were taken into as prisoners. They had to pay ransoms. How many things happened? Eventually they had to make a truce. And they broke the truce, and the Prophet ﷺ came with some 20,000 followers, and they just had to submit. Now, think about that. If all they had to do was to produce 3 lines of poetry like Al-Kawthar, and that would have ended the whole thing, does it make sense logically that they would go and do all of this other stuff and not do that? Because the Quran is saying, if you don't believe it's from Allah, do it. Surely they are the masters of the language. Why didn't they do it? This was a challenge which they needed to meet. Why didn't they do it? Because they couldn't. We can understand that much of the miracle because we don't know Arabic. We're not able to appreciate the real beauty and the miraculous quality of the literary miracle of the Quran. But we can understand it, at least in this historical context, that it must be a miracle if they couldn't do it. The expanding universe, or the movement of the sun, or the cycle of water and springs, and there are so many things that are addressed in the Quran that is a lecture in and of itself. I'll just mention one which I think many people are not aware of. Most of these other ones I mentioned, you know. But there is one which I came to learn maybe about a year or a year and a half ago. I was talking with one professor of geology, and he was explaining this particular miracle to me, which I thought was quite interesting. And it concerns Surah Al-Hadid. Surah Al-Hadid, the chapter of iron. Al-Hadid means iron. And Allah describes iron saying, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدِ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. I have sent down iron, which has great power and a lot of benefit to humankind. He went and he analyzed this statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what human beings knew about iron. And it had always remained something of a puzzle that Allah used the term sent down iron, to send it down to the earth, because people discover iron in the earth. We dig up the earth and we find it. We bring it up. It's not coming down. And until very recently, this remained something inexplicable. However, in modern times, when they have now worked out theoretically how the earth was formed and the approximate temperatures of the earth in its formation, they came to realize that the heat which was generated in the formation of the earth was not sufficient to produce iron. This is a scientific fact. Iron was not produced in the formation of the earth, though it forms a good portion of the core of the earth, the molten core, which gives it its magnetic field around the earth, and a large portion of the crust. And iron is inside of virtually everything. Hemoglobin, it's in chlorophyll. It is critical for the transfer of oxygen in our systems. It's all over the place. Iron. But it was not formed on the earth. So they, in their researches, came to find out that much of the meteorites coming from out of space high in iron. That the iron came from out of space into the earth. And in the early stages, when the earth was being formed, where the crust was not solid, then it used to go right down to the core. So that's why it concentrated in the highest percentages in the core, then in the crust, etc., and then it ended up playing this massive role. So I said, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Anyway, the point is that the Quran is a unique book. It is Allah's final communication to humankind. It remains the miracle which anyone who wants to get evidence that Muhammad ﷺ was a prophet of Allah, it is there with the Quran. That miracle will remain until the last day. It had to, because for anybody to believe, we cannot require them to believe about something which is no longer present. It has to be something tangible. So Allah left the Quran as the major miracle of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to convince the people of his time as well as the people until the last day on this earth. And as I said before, it is unique in its style and presentation. It is a discourse. And when we read the Quran, we should keep in mind its subject matter, as I said, and its theme. Before going into these questions, I'd just like to mention that the issue of Salah, there's something of a bit of confusion. Our brother who was organizing this thing, people who were sort of on him that the sisters should be praying in this other room and let the brothers pray in here. But actually, this is not from the Sunnah. Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani, they both opposed the idea that women in a masjid should be locked off in a room where they cannot see the imam, they cannot see those who are praying ahead of them. Why? Because this was not the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. It was not the Sunnah. Furthermore, it creates problems, as what happened here. The brother's mic came off sisters couldn't hear what he was doing, confusion. This is clear evidence. And this is what happens in masjids where they do this, and the imam does sajda to tilawa. He's going to make sujood for reciting a particular verse from the Quran. He goes into sujood. The women in their section think he's gone into ruku'. He comes out. They're going into qiyam. The salah is a mess. This was not the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I know some people say, well, you know, they were the Sahaba. Today, Muslims are problematic, you know. We can't trust these men. The point is, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a verse in the Quran which was revealed about a Sahabi who during the prayer, he used to stay at the back line, and when he went into ruku', he used to look under his armpit at the women. This was a Sahabi, and the verse from the Quran was revealed about him. So, what does that mean? They were angels? So we have one rule for them and we have another rule for us because we were all devils and they were angels at that time? No. They were human beings. So, of course, in a situation where the space is tight, you know, it's better to put a kind of a divider to at least separate where the women are praying from the men, some kind of separation. But it doesn't need to be a lock-off room, lockdown situation. You know, this has become common in many parts of the Muslim world, but it's really not in keeping with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the best of generations. It was not their way. This in fact is bid'ah. And Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani has said so in no uncertain terms. So has Sheikh bin Baz. It is bid'ah. Well, the situation of the travelers being able to make the two prayers together is something which is from the Sunnah. If the place is big enough where those who are residents can pray to a section where they can leave or they can continue, and the others who are praying, travelers, can pray together, then it's better to do that. You know, perhaps to organize it, try to organize in such a way that those who are residents maybe stay over to the right hand side, so those, but still people are coming whilst we're praying, they're coming later, so that problem is not going to go away. But the point is that we try to do it to the best of our ability, the best ability we're able to. We try to do it, and it is okay once those people finish their prayer, they leave, you just fill up the gaps and you carry on. And the other point which had come up, I should just mention, the idea that if one prays Dhuhr with an imam, for example, who is a resident, so he has prayed 4 rak'ah, and of course you as a traveler praying behind an imam who's a resident, you have to pray 4 along with him. You cannot stop at 2. You must pray 4. So once you have finished your 4, you can then, along with the other people who are travelers, stand up, make iqamah, and do your 2. Some people question that, saying, where is the evidence? Where is the proof that the Prophet ﷺ did this? Well, the point is, the proof is that the Prophet ﷺ combined and shortened. We know that is a fact. We also know that he said, if you're praying behind an imam who's praying 4, then you have to pray 4. So, in doing that, prayed the 4, combined the 2, we have done what the Prophet ﷺ said. For one to say, bring me evidence that the Prophet ﷺ did that, I will have to say it is impossible, because he was always the imam. So it's not possible. That circumstance is not going to arise because he was always the imam. You need to bring the evidence that it is not permissible. We are hearing that Imams are Sufis. Do you know if this is true? Imam Siraj, Imam Quick, that's Abdullah Hakim Quick, and Zaid Shakir. Well, I don't know. I don't know of Siraj Wahaj as being a Sufi. I know he may have some misunderstandings about some issues of Aqidah or something like this, possibly. But Sufi, I don't know this. I've never heard this before. Abdullah Hakim Quick, I know absolutely that he isn't. He has given lectures against Sufism. There's no way. He's not a Sufi. He was my classmate. We studied together, graduated from Medina. In fact, he gave me Shahada. So I know he's not a Sufi. As to Zaid Shakir, I don't know. I know when he left America and went to study in Syria under one of the top Sufis there, when he left America, he wasn't a Sufi. But what he came back as, I don't know. Is it permissible when reading the Quran to join the ayahs when reciting it to beautify one's qira'ah? No, joining ayahs for beautification, it's joining ayahs because you can join ayahs. You can read continuously or you can pause. Of course, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was to pause at the end of each verse. That was his sunnah. But it's also permissible to link them and continue reading. So the issue of doing so to beautify the voice, let's leave out to beautify the voice. If we're going to manipulate the Quran for beautification, it's not a good idea in general. But that one may recite in different ways, sometimes separate or combining verses, this is perfectly permissible. Well, our brother's question that it is not permissible to beautify one's voice when calling the adhan, but it is okay for recitation of Quran. Truly, there is a statement of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said that whoever does not sing the Quran, man lam yataghanna bil Quran falaysa minna, whoever does not sing the Quran is not of us. Right? So the idea of beautifying one's voice when reciting the Quran, we know this is from the Sunnah. It's strongly recommended that we don't read Quran like we read a book. We should beautify it with our voices. But the adhan, what is most important, that it's loud and clear, that it is melodious, there is no harm. There's nothing against it being melodious. But when one starts to stretch things out to extremes, see, then we're entering into another realm. Right? We don't stretch things out to the point where we're mispronouncing these words in Arabic. This is where it is no longer acceptable. It becomes distortion of the adhan. No, the Sahaba did. Sahaba did. It was his common practice to stop. This was how he normally recited. It was common practice to stop. But we know that the joining of verses, they did do. That's why you have, for example, two forms of Surah Al-Qari'ah. You can find in some Qurans, those that are printed in India and Pakistan, Al-Qari'ah is presented as one verse, Mal-Qari'ah as a second verse. Whereas in those printed from Egypt and Syria, etc., Al-Qari'ah, Mal-Qari'ah is one verse. And there are many other examples in the Quran. And that's why you can't fix the exact number of verses there are in the Quran. Because It is only in Surah Al-Fatiha that we know it has exactly 7 verses. All of the others, though we're looking, and we talked about 3 verses in Al-Kawthar, etc., we cannot say it with certainty. We cannot say it with certainty. Meaning that you could join the first and the second, or join the second and the third, because the numbers were not fixed except in Surah Al-Fatiha. So the total number of verses in the Quran, we don't know. Where there is, sisters asking about the principle of mad, which is elongation of vowels. If one applies this in the adhan, it has to be applied. You cannot say Allahu Akbar. You can't. There is an alif there, so you must say Allahu Akbar. But now, what we're talking about is not Allahu Akbar, and if you say it very slowly, you're saying Allahu Akbar. So everything has been slowed down and everything has been lengthened proportionately. There's a difference between that and saying Allahu Akbar. No, you see, it's out of proportion now. It's been twisted. There's no justification for that kind of mad beyond, those people who specialize now and turn that into a whole sing-song, right? Okay, in the case where you had started the prayer behind us and it broke, you could no longer follow the prayer anymore. If you had completed 2 rak'ah, for example, or you were doing 2, say you completed 1, then it would have been enough for you to have just kept your line, one sister in the middle, continue to lead the rest and complete the salah. Okay, it's too chaotic for that. Then you could have just somebody has to say something. Somebody has to say something, right? Pardon? Break off and do your own salah? This was not the best. The best thing is to pray in jama'ah. To do it in jama'ah. You all were there as a jama'ah. You should know as women that your prayer in jama'ah is better than your prayer by yourself. So there, one of the sisters should have just led you in salah. Whether you went and did the 2 over again, do the 2 complete, or you just did what was remaining and completed it. That would have been better. But if you didn't and you ended up praying separately and just doing it, then mashallah, you did what you were able. Yeah, that sister who was in, it would need the sister who was in the middle of the front line or close to it. She should have just said Allahu Akbar and sat up. Everybody then would just start to follow her and complete the rest of the prayer. Just as if men are praying and the imam breaks wudu. Pardon? Or died, yeah, we don't have to go all the way there, but he breaks wudu, he breaks wudu and he has to leave. He gets up and he leaves, Somebody has to take over. Now there are narrations, there's athar of the Sahabiyat, Aisha and Salama, that they stood in the middle of the line. Yeah. Well, that was their sunnah. Of course, there's nothing which says that among the women, that woman who's leading the salah could stand in front. There's nothing which said she couldn't. But if the narrations describing what the wives of the Prophet ﷺ did, that's the one we follow. That is the way of the Salaf. If we just address that in the case of the Quran, right? One of the ways that Dr. York liked to create confusion amongst people, right? Dr. York was the founder of the Ansarullah community in New York and other parts of the States. That was popular for a period of time, and Muslims were deluded into thinking that they were actually Muslims, and they sat on the council, of masjids in New York and so and so. And I wrote a book on them called The Ansar Cult in America, exposing them to be not from Islam at all. But in fact, they were enemies of Islam. I exposed their beliefs, taking it right out of their books and comparing what Islam says, what they said, and that basically, alhamdulillah, blew them out of the water. After that, they fell apart. Not before admitting, Dr. York said that they really weren't Muslims anyway, they were really Jews, and then he changed his name to Rabbi Reuben, and he went into the Jewish thing, right? Anyway, the point is that why was I telling you that? Oh yeah, one of the ways that he would like to create confusion amongst the Sunni Muslims to draw them into his net is he would take the translation of Yusuf Ali. He would take Fatiha, then he would take Pickthall, then he would take about 5, 6, 7, 8 different translations, and he would show them one after the other. Look at this, these people don't know Arabic, and they're this, that, and the other. So then he started his own mistranslation of the Quran, right? So he created his own. So he locked his followers into following him by claiming that the others were mistranslating the Quran, and that's why there are all these differences among them. The reality is that, of course, when you're translating, as I said, translation of the Quran cannot be done. We cannot translate the Quran. All we can do is write in English some of the meanings of the Arabic. So in fact, what we call translation is just a tafsir in English of some of the meanings. That's all it is. Similarly, if you're going to translate a hadith, that's what you're going to do. You'll make a sharh. Instead of tafsir, the Arabic term they use for explanation is sharh. You do a kind of a sharh in English. Because if you translate hadiths word for word, you can create all kinds of confusion. And that's exactly what Dr. York did. He gave you the word for word meaning, and then he started sticking it together this way and that way, and he came up with a whole nother story altogether. So in translation, one has to look at the commentaries of the scholars on the hadith to understand, similarly to understand the Quran. So what you're going to put in English will be the closest that you can come to explain the meaning of the Arabic. That's the bottom line. Do you recommend we teach our children to memorize Quran even though they don't understand what they are reading? Yes. How would you recommend we teach those who are learning Arabic but English is their primary language? Well, there are books, there are teachers, there are classes. We need to put the children in classes with where people are teaching them to understand Arabic, to communicate in Arabic. And this needs to be done with Arabs. A method of da'wah now becoming popular is to visit Muslim homes, leaving homes for 3 days, 40 days, 4 months, and so on. For this purpose, what is your position on this method and your advice to Muslims on this subject? Well, the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not to send out ignorant Muslims to spend time sleeping in mosques across Arabia. This was not his sunnah. Nor was it the sunnah of the Sahaba to do that for 3 days, 40 days, 4 months, or any of these numbers. It was not from the Sunnah. This was not the way of the Salaf, the righteous early generations. Not their way. Their way was to send out knowledgeable individuals from the community to other communities that needed knowledge. And they would stay there and teach the people. When they had finished teaching people who would continue, they may return or they may stay there and live there. That was the way of the early generation. It's not to say that on a spontaneous basis, if we got together and said, hey, let's go visit the masjid in so and so and meet the brothers, and share, socialize, and we went to some other communities and visited, it's not any harm. There's no harm in doing that. But in setting it up as the way to call people to Islam, calling it fi sabilillah, changing the meanings of the Quran, when the Sahaba, they all understood fi sabilillah means jihad, out there on the battlefield. That's fi sabilillah. Calling going out for 3 days fi sabilillah is a joke. It is ludicrous. It is making fun. It is demeaning jihad to do it. And I remember myself, because when I first came into Islam, and I looked around trying to find where is some knowledge. I wanted to learn the deen. Met brothers from the Jama'ah, and they told me, well, we're going to England, and in England, in every masjid there is a Maulana. You can go there and learn. So I said, okay, let me go. Let me go sit with those people of knowledge. Now, the point is, I went, I tried to seek knowledge. I realized after I had gained what I could, and I learned something. I learned tajweed of the Quran and a few things. And when I was about to come back, and I remember originally I was encouraged, I was to go for 7 days. I agreed to go for 1 week. And I was sort of goaded into staying for 3 months, right? Almost destroyed my marriage, because I'd only been married for about a week. And there's a way they have of, at the end of their talks, they say, look at this brother, how he sacrificed. He only just got married a week ago, and he's here out and they they kind of put that thing on you. And hey, I was out for 3 months. My wife was finally told me, hey, listen, if you're not making it back, maybe you're not going to find me here when you come back. So, okay, I said, time to get back. Right? So the point is that on my way back, when we stopped in London, because I used to like to read a lot, so I went to a bookstore and I bought these books. There was books on different aspects of Islam, etc. I bought stacks of books. And I came back into the main masjid where we were staying with these stacks of books. And the secretary of the main man, he told me, hey, what are you doing with all these books? I said, it's books, Islamic books. I said, where'd you get these things from? I said, this bookstore. This is Jamati Islamic bookstore. You don't know what the intention of these people are. Don't read these books. You just keep reading Tablighi Nisab. I had read the thing 3 times already. I've been through the whole thing 3 times. And I said, hey, there's a problem here. Because this idea of wanting to just limit your whole knowledge base to this one book, I felt something wasn't quite right. And when I expressed to them, hey, I think I want to go to Mecca or Medina and go study Arabic, they said, better you go to Pakistan. Spend 4 months in Pakistan. You fly right over Mecca and Medina, go to Pakistan. In fact, better you go to India, to Nizamabad there in India, right? Where Hazrat Ji's base was, right? And I said, but this is the Arabic I want to get. They said, well, listen, the light of Islam that was in Mecca and Medina, it is no longer there. It is now in Nizamabad, where Hazrat Ji is. MashaAllah. Then I was told that, I said, but what's Arabic? I want to get. I said, well, listen, if you go on the Jamaat, with the Arabic Jamaat, you see, there is a brother who didn't know any Arabic. And he went with the Jamaat, Arabic Jamaat, all over India. And he just used to sit there. And then one day, he understood everything. Of course, I said, well, I don't know if I can really depend on that one, right? And then I was told, because when they had the big ijtima in Dewsbury, the people had said, we were a group from America, we were there, and I said, there's a spiritual bath going on. I said, spiritual bath? I said, yeah, what was that? They said, come, they're doing the spiritual bath. It was bayat in Urdu, which was bay'ah in Arabic. It ended up being bait, and from bait it got corrupt to bath, and we understand some kind of spiritual bath was going on. So we went to the house where Hazrat Ji was, Sheikh Hazrat Ji, and they had these towels tied together, and we all held on to the towel. He said something in Urdu, and then after that he said, that was a spiritual bath. I said, yeah. So when I was leaving, I asked the secretary, I said, what does the spiritual bath mean anyway? Right? He said, what it means is that when you go back to Canada and you have to do anything important in your life, you must write to Hazrat Ji. I will translate your letter into Hindi or Urdu and tell Hazrat Ji. He will give advice, and I'll write and send it back to you. Now, I knew that this process is going to take at least 10 days for a letter to go from Canada, to Nizamabad, right? Or Nizamuddin, I don't know what this place is called. Nizamuddin, right? Nizamuddin. And maybe it'd take another 10 days for him to get around to translating it and talking to Hazrat Ji. And then another 10 days to come back. So I have a major decision to make in my life. I have to wait 1 month to find out what to do. I said, hey, something wrong here, and really there was something wrong, So the point is that after I came back and I announced to my wife that we are now Hanafis, right? because they explained that there's these 4 madhabs, you got to follow one, doesn't matter which one you follow, but Imam Abu Hanifa was Imam-e Azam, the greatest Imam. And most Muslims in the world are Hanafis. But you can follow anyone. Of course, I became Hanafi. Right? I learned the prayer of women to teach my wife, because there's a set of acrobatics they teach women, Hanafi women, to make their prayer is a very acrobatic affair. Right? It's not regular prayer, right? So I learned this acrobatic thing, and I went back and taught it to my wife. This is how we have to pray. You have to pray from now on, right? And then, alhamdulillah, we moved home, and we're living right next to this masjid. And the imam of the masjid, he was from Egypt. And I started studying Arabic with him and learning fiqh. And of course he was from the Shafi'i madhab. And after I was a Hanafi, I had already decided I was a Hanafi. I had learned all the Hanafi fiqh I could from the Maulanas there in England. And he is now telling me it's this, it's that, and here's the proof for it. Because of course when I was getting the Hanafi thing, there were no proofs. It's just this is what you do, that's what you do, that's what you do. Well, now he was saying it's not that. It's really this, 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 and this. And here's the proof. Prophet ﷺ said, the verse so-and-so. I said, we have a problem here. I need to get to the source. So I decided to go to Medina. Alhamdulillah, this is within 1 year after I accepted Islam. There had some scholarships showed up at that time, and Abdullah and myself, we went to Medina. Abdullah came. Now we went into Medina, and the situation in Medina was rough. This is 1974. I mean, seriously rough. I mean, I'd been with the Jamaat in England, and it can get pretty rough there too, right? You know, these bathrooms and, you know, stuff we used to. But Medina was really rough. And, you know, we were living in these houses which were made, I think, from the turn of the century, from, you know, date palm tree trunks and dirt and, you know, volcanic rock built by the Turks, you know, over 300 years ago. Really primitive stuff. No air conditioning. You know, and it gets seriously hot there. I got stung by a scorpion twice. Right? Yeah. First time I didn't even know how serious it was. Actually, I was sleeping. The thing stuck me while I was sleeping. I got up, I saw it, and killed it with my slipper and went back to sleep. Tried to go back to sleep, and I started to think, well, I wonder if this thing is dangerous. I said, maybe I better go to the hospital and just check this thing out. I went in there, told them, hey, bring him over here, and, you know, give him a shot. And, you know, I didn't realize this thing was so serious, you know. And after I got the shot and everything, and the effects of the poison and the shot or whatever, I thought I was dying. I felt like I was dying. I told my wife, please, just read Quran for me here, you know, just sit here and read Quran. I think if I close my eyes, I'm not coming back, right? So, anyway, after all of this, I met some brothers from the Jamaat. They came to Medina. So they said to me, brother, have you been out fi sabilillah? I said, hey, if I'm not fi sabilillah here, man, you know, there is no fi sabilillah. You understand? But see, they were so locked into this idea that the only way I could be fi sabilillah is if in Medina there I went out for 3 days. You know, in spite of all that I had gone through there and everything, I wasn't fi sabilillah until I went out for 3 days. You know? This is a distorted idea of, you know, what constitutes, you know, da'wah and the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. You know? Now, the reality of the Hanafi madhab, you know, the majority of what is practiced in the Hanafi madhab cannot be attributed to Abu Hanifa. This is the reality. Really, this is the case most so in the Hanafi madhab. You know, so the fact that we find these differences, etc., some of these things have come in from areas which are under cultural influence, where the scholars of that area have adopted certain practices and taken certain decisions, and it's become a standard in the later generations of scholars from that madhab, and not to be found in the early generations. Because you will find Hanafi scholars of the early generations who raised their hand with each takbir, and they were Hanafi scholars. Okay, what happens when sisters are praying with the imam from separate rooms and the imam says, oh, I think we did this already, stays in sajda? There is a brother and his wife who are both from India. They both claim to be Sayyid, blood descendants of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Can you comment on this? I would say, if you claim to be a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, first, prove it. You trace your ancestry right back to the Prophet ﷺ. You know, most of these people who say this, they can't. It's just been said, and people have just gone along with it. You cannot trace it back. And secondly, so what? You know, Abu Lahab was from the family of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and Allah said he's in hell. So what? You know, but, you know, unfortunately, they have turned it into, as I said, a kind of a caste thing. You know, coming out of the caste system of Hinduism with the Brahmins and the Shudras, you know, they felt there should be some distinction here. You know, so they became Sayyids. A sister is asking about the verse Allahu alladhi khalaqa sab'a samawatin wa min al-ardi mithluhunna, that Allah has created 7 heavens and from the earth a similar number. That there are hadiths which speaks about the 7 heavens and the 7 earths. What are the 7 earths? Allah knows best. If you have prayed your fard prayer and wish to pray it with more concentration, can you do it again? No. Prophet ﷺ forbade the repetition of a fard prayer. It's not permissible. You pray it, it's done. You can make sunnah prayers you want to do to try to make up for some weaknesses of your compulsory prayer, but you cannot repeat the compulsory prayer. At one place in the Quran, Allah says that a day with Allah equals 1,000 years on earth, and another place He says that it's 50,000 years. 50,000 years from what you calculate. These 2 calculations, scholars of tafsir have pointed out, refer to different occasions. One, the day of Qiyamah, that day would be 50,000 years or whatever, and the day in which the angels go up to Allah, their journey is the journey of a day, and that's like 1,000 years as would pass on earth. Okay, so the numbers are referring to 2 different occasions. I don't need to get into the speed of light because there's nothing there that says speed of light. It says that the angels go up to Allah in a day which is like 1,000 years from which you count. It says it. That is the time that passes. That's how long the day is relative to us on earth and the angels. Now what speed that the angels go at, Allah knows. I heard it was impermissible to name your children after chapters in the Quran, or things like Mina or Arafah, or even names that praise themselves like Iman or purity. What do you know about this? Well, there are some names that the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade, names which indicate a sense of self-righteousness. Names like Khairun Nisa or Fakhruddin. These kind of names were, it's really not liked in Islam. I mean, it's proud. Fakhruddin, is pride of the religion. Yarhamukallah. So it's better to take names of the companions and others. He recommended, there's a hadith where he recommended that we not take, I don't remember exactly which name it was, I don't know whether it was taqwa or some name of that nature, but it would be like Iman, because he said, so that somebody will not ask, is Iman at your house? And you say no. You don't want to enter into a situation where you're denying something. Iman is where you're basically saying there's no faith in my house. Is righteousness in your house? No. So you don't want names which will have those kind of implications where you may make those kind of answers. And names of angels, no harm. Do women have to recite out loud during the Maghrib or Isha, or do they recite quietly like Dhuhr and Asr? I've seen this being done. What is correct? Well, they recite loud enough that they can hear themselves. If they're making a jama'ah by themselves, it should be enough that the women that are praying together can be heard. If a woman is praying by herself, she reads aloud enough that she can be heard. I mean, to say not, that's what the Prophet ﷺ did, and he said, pray as you saw me pray, to both men and women. So that is the basic practice. To say otherwise, one must bring evidence. Do women have to cover their hair or cover themselves when reading Quran? No. There is nothing in the Sunnah to indicate this. It's a cultural thing in some parts of the world. Also, it's a cultural thing in some parts of the world that when people bathe, they don't take off all their clothes. They wear some little garments and bathe in these garments because they are under the impression that it's not permissible for you to take off all your clothes. But this is not from the Sunnah. Where I came from in colleges, there are Muslim society centers where students could do da'wah, perform salah besides my college. What would be your concern to convince them to make one? I guess the person is asking how would we combine the various groups that are active on campuses or whatever. And the foundation on which we unite is on knowledge, on correct knowledge of Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah as it was understood by that early generation. Anyway, does one have to make Salatul Witr daily? No.